So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to spend a little bit of the time on why is this an important question? Why is recirculation an issue? We're going to go through a case study that we looked at, and then we're going to look at some of the implications about it. And certainly for those of you, and I think everybody would agree that Mycoplasma continues to be a problem pathogen in the industry and continues to be hurting performance. And if we look at this cascade, as we talk about Mycoplasma control, there's really two different methods that we can move down. One is to continue to manage the organism and control the organism and immunity in the system, and the other is elimination. And there's lots of different breakdowns from each one of those. We're not going to go into that. And we also have a good classification system now to identify where herds are in the process. And so I think it's a good opportunity to just revisit these and make sure as we talk about this and go forward that it has different implications as we look at the different sides of these two trees. And it goes back to some of that original work of how long does Mycoplasma, how long do animals stay infected with Mycoplasma, and Maria's work telling us that that 240 days is kind of the important time frame that has allowed us to move forward on these eliminations. And the question really has been for a long time is, do these animals have the opportunity to recirculate once they've cleared the organism? And so that's what we're here to talk about today. And I know we've had, talking with Maria and others and Eduardo at several meetings debating this question and saying, is it really possible or not? And again, the reason that it's an important piece of the debate is that are there more animals, or what's the number of animals that are shedding in an outbreak? So if we've got a lot of immune animals and they don't recirculate, then that reduces the numbers that are being shed. And again, could we reduce the cost of elimination? If these animals don't recirculate, could we reduce the cost of elimination programs? So let's go down the control side first. And so we'll work down that and work through, if we're going to keep the herd positive and we're going to keep it as a controlled, we're going to control the immunity, we're going to try and reduce the amount of numbers of Mycoplasma moving through the system. We know the ROS's data says that it's very difficult to do to get those gilts, particularly if we're bringing them in as selects, to get those animals exposed and to stop shedding. And subsequent work has gone on, and Amanda did a nice job of showing us that there's multiple different ways we can expose these animals. And again, there's certainly some new technologies there. The aerosol exposure has certainly made life a lot easier than doing the intratracheals and has become more widely adapted. Again, the pigs, it's more friendly to the pigs and to the people than doing the intratracheal method, but has been very successful in getting that good immune platform to work off of. And I like the diagram that Maria and Eduardo came up with, looking at the pig, as we bring a negative pig to the farm and we get them exposed, we want them to stop shedding or reduce the shedding, probably shouldn't say stop shedding, reduce the shedding by the time they farrow and have their first litter of piglets. We got the 240 days to work with, and if we work backwards on the timeline, that says we got to get those animals exposed by about 80 pounds to be successful. And so, again, that recirculation question comes back here. And one of the questions, or one of the concerns with recirculation in a controlled herd is if there is instability in the herd, let's say there is a clinical outbreak and you're trying to keep the herd controlled, is it going to be more than the P1s that are important to control the problem? Is it just P1s that we have to be focused on? And will there be increasing shedding, at least for a time frame, in the rest of the population in the herd? And so that's, to me, the important question to be asked here is if we're not doing a perfect job and we do have a spike up in the herd, is it going to be more than just the P1s? When we talk about Mycoplasma elimination, again, here we're wanting to get rid of the organism from the farm, and so certainly going to be some different aspects to why we're concerned about that. We know there's multiple ways we can do it. The closure The traditional closure method with medication at the end has been very successful. We've used multiple different medication programs and had a lot of good success over the course of time here with being able to eliminate Mycoplasma from herds. If we look at some of the percentages here, we're in that neighborhood of 76% on the herd closures, 53% on the herds that we do just a medication program. So again, good success over the course of time. I've worked with Daniel Linares and their group at Iowa State to say, what's that really worth when we look at some of the costs of production? And this is just breaking down those costs by the different areas of impact. And you can see it's roughly about $5. And the quotes in the literature are anywhere from $2 to $10. So probably makes sense. And I think that $4 to $5 is probably a pretty good average of what it really costs. If we add that up to what's the benefit per year, what's the cost, how long does it take to recoup that investment? Again, it takes about 3 months, a little over 3 months to get the payback on the herd closure. If we do the medication program, it's a little bit longer because we have more direct costs with the antibiotic treatment. So, again, when we're talking about recirculation in the terms of elimination, one of the questions has been is, do we have to do all animals need to be vaccinated or treated? If it's really just in the P1s and we're waiting for them to quiet down, why don't we just do the P1s? And again, most current programs today treat all sows, and we started out doing that. We had success, and I think most people have stuck with that. And I know some systems have tried doing just the P1 animals and haven't been as successful. So again, I think it tells us that there's some concern there, and that's part of the debate. Again, we'll go ahead and get to what you asked me to talk about, Maria, is actually what does really happen. And so we had the opportunity to do a herd that was showing clinical signs of Mycoplasma. We had an opportunity to do a case study and wanted to take that opportunity to see if we could answer the question. Could we say, is there recirculation or not? So this herd, before going, had long-term been positive, so had been a herd that was positive over time. There was some changes in management, and they had some instability, and then they started a very strict gilt entry procedure about 2 years before they went into elimination. And then every group of gilts was exposed and tested to make sure that they were positive. And not every animal was tested, so understand that not every animal was, but every group was tested, and not every group tested 100% positive, but again, we showed exposure in all groups, and so again, felt pretty good that there was long-term good immunity going into the herd closure, went through a herd closure, and then had clinical signs show up, and had a significant number of the negative gilts that had been introduced into the herd, and all the way up to second parity, and we saw an outbreak in the herd. And the clinical signs were cough in the sows, and then it soon followed down to the wean to finish flow where they saw cough downstream as well. So it certainly fit with a classic Mycoplasma outbreak. And testing was confirmed that the negative introductions now were indeed, that came after the elimination, were now indeed positive. And sequenced, I got it here as a different strain, but actually as the same strain as previously. So again, the objectives to the study were to see if these animals that had been exposed, and then we brought that are next to these newly negative infected animals, or these negative additions into the herd that turned positive with a recent myco infection, could they be recolonized? And so the way we set it up was to, the pointer's kind of weak here, but you can see the one highlighted A being a negative animal is introduced to the herd, being the one that was going to be the center of the cluster. And we tried to identify sows that were coughing in the center of those clusters, and then as many as possible of the sows that surrounded that animal to be P2 and higher, to be those immune sows that that could potentially recirculate. And again, realizing the challenge that not every cluster is perfect, and when you're doing it in commercial situation. So again, the testing that was done was tracheal swabs, and each sample was ran individually to identify the status. Also collected some environmental samples at the same time using the aluminum foil method. And when we looked at the results, you can see here that as we added up, if you take positive and suspects, and I'll get into a little bit more of that debate as well, but if we just look at it holistically on the immune sows, if you just look at the positives and suspects, we had 80% of those animals being positive, and of the negative animals that have been introduced, we had 90%. So again, Mycoplasma moves slowly through populations, so we didn't necessarily expect 100% of those to be positive. And so, even though we were in the middle of an outbreak. We looked at the environmental samples, the particle deposition using the aluminum foil method, and you could see each of the barns. There was 3 different gestation barns, and each of those barns were positive, but a fairly high CT value. Again, not unexpected for particle deposition sampling, so we certainly knew that there was Mycoplasma in the barn as well as in the pigs. And Mark had set up some of the air emission study, some of the work he's done just using a simple piece of cloth out in front of the fan, did some of that testing, and you can see here too as well that we demonstrated that there was Mycoplasma exiting the barn in the ventilation, from the ventilation system, and a little bit higher CT values than what we saw in the particle deposition. So again, the numbers are going to be important here as we talk about this immune population. So we had the discussion as we were going through doing the testing, and for those of you that have done tracheal swab testing, you know that it doesn't happen real quickly, and so you're in the barn for a while with all the materials you're using, and so we had the debate, well, is it just that everything's getting contaminated because we knew the air was contaminated from particle deposition, we knew the air was contaminated from the air exiting the fans, how many were actually below the detection of environmental samples? And if we use 31 because that's what the pit fan samples were, we still had 4% of the animals positive. So again, for me, it was simple enough to just think about it, positive suspects. But if you want to be more critical and take it to the next level, it certainly gave us that opportunity to look at that. So if we looked at location, was there more likelihood? Our hypothesis going in was that the sows next to the sow A, those 2 sows would be more likely to be positive, and the sow directly across from her were more likely to be positive. And what we found was that the 2 that neighbored the sow, or the gilt that was positive, those 2 immune sows did turn up more likely to be positive, and it makes sense because of the close proximity. And the sow that was directly across really wasn't that different than the other sows. And so, again, probably would expect that with distance from that initial point source. And if we break that down and that was looking at all sows, and so if we break it down and just look at the immune sows, we can see that, again, that relationship stays there when we just look at the immune population and the ones that were positive. And so, again, you can see where those neighboring sows are the more likely ones to be affected. So, additional results. We said this is all fine and good. We want to make sure that what we're seeing is really real. So we worked together to say, what can we go back and look at? And so 2 months after we got these initial samples, we went back to look at this, and we went back and tested some sows, and we were going to re-look at those sows and see if they shed off to their piglets. Well, by that time, most of those sows were testing negative on tracheal swabs or had very high CT values, and so we'll leave that work for someone else to do, and another graduate student, Maria. So more work for the future. And again, we know that these immune animals may recirculate it. Again, you have to be a little careful here. We're not 100% sure that every animal we tested was exposed. We believe all the groups that came in were exposed, but we didn't test every individual animal. So we can't really say every animal, but I would say yes, it recirculated. And again, we know that, that there's going to be more shedding, higher numbers, more problems downstream as we talk about it. And we need to do more than just deal with the P1 offspring if we're having an outbreak in a herd that's already got immunity. And there's going to be a bigger impact on performance. And I think it goes back to some of the frustrations that we've had when we talk about mycoplasma and dealing with mycoplasma when we have these herds go back through another clinical outbreak. So again, I think if we're going to use a controlled strategy, the implication is long-term, if we're doing a controlled strategy and controlling mycoplasma, we need to be focused again on getting that early exposure and making sure all those groups get positive. We need to make sure that all the animals entering are immune. So if they do get re-exposed, that hopefully at least they'll have the early indication. Going back and looking in that herd, it looks like they shed less time, so that's a good thing, but they still do recirculate. And again, we need to go back into these herds that start to show clinical signs that have good immunity and use the tools we have and come back in and do the sequencing to make sure that there isn't a new introduction of a different mycoplasma into the herd that could be giving us some of these problems, showing the clinical signs, just to make sure that it isn't just the recirculation piece that's being the headache or the problem. Again, for an elimination strategy, I think it goes back and at least makes me feel better over the course of time and the money that I've spent of my clients, is that we need to treat and vaccinate all animals in the herd. We probably can't get by with just doing the P1s. And again, when we are doing the whole herd exposures and making sure we're getting everything exposed, particularly in acute outbreaks, to make sure all animals are immune, again, we need to consider that we need to be that could be happening in some of the older animals that may have been previously exposed. And so, again, we're going to have those higher numbers in the looking at our treatment plans, looking at our vaccination protocols, looking at how we're going to flow those pigs going forward, especially if they're in a commingled flow or commingled type production system. Again, like I said, the initial look looks like they may actually be clearing it a little quicker, but certainly want to be, there certainly needs to be more work done to say that's a reality. So recirculation in these previously immune animals certainly may occur. I believe that it does occur. That was my a little bit, to be honest with you, that was my bias going in. And herds using control as a long-term strategy need to make sure we get all those gilts exposed. At least we can reduce the amount of shedding from those animals, hopefully, as they go forward. And we need to consider the impact as we look at these elimination programs and as we're putting those together and designing those protocols as we go forward. So future work, certainly we need to know, is this repeatable? Is it just a one herd phenomena? Certainly, I think some more work needs to be done in this area. One of the challenges is always getting the funding to be able to do these projects, but more work needs to be done. If I was to do it again, we would go back and look to see if we could confirm lesions in those animals, sacrifice some animals, and do some immunohistochemistries to make sure that we indeed have infection and we're not just finding the organism that's already in the environment. So I think that's a fair question to put up there. For some future work to be done. And again, can these animals that we can find are recolonized, or at least are positive when we test them, can they shed it onto their piglets? I think it's another important question to answer as we go back and look at this data and say, where can it lead to in the future? So as always with research, there's more questions to answer than questions that are answered. So again, the motivation to the study was really to answer the question of this long-term debate. Is there recirculation in immune animals or not? And the other was a bet with Robert. And I hope after Robert gets to see this or read the proceedings, which I'm sure he will, I'll get my bottle of wine. but we'll see what happens going forward. So in summary, again, we continue to, at the end of the day, there's always more challenges, more opportunities to learn. I think this is an area where we can go and continue to learn some more and continue to understand a little bit more of the dynamics of what's going on in these Mycoplasma infections. Certainly from a control standpoint, certainly from an elimination standpoint, I think it tells us that we can formulate these plans a little bit better. Certainly like to thank the sample collectors and BI for, and specifically Eduardo Fano for helping to do the funding of the diagnostics in this test process, and I'll be happy to take any questions that there might be. Yes. Yes. The question was there any clinical signs in these animals are previously immune animals, and if so, did we record that? We didn't record that. If I had the chance to go back and do it again, I would have recorded that as well. But yes, there was pretty much cough working through the entire barn. So would you say they're worse than the parity ones? It's a little hard to sort out, and that's certainly one more thing to add to the list of work that needs to be done. But yes, there were some older sows that were showing clinical signs, as well as the offspring downstream. Yep. The question is what's this do to elimination as we go forward? And I think it really doesn't change elimination as we think about this. I think it just, we need to be focused on doing all animals. There's been some debate, how can we make these programs cheaper? And so one of the debates always comes back to, do we need to vaccinate? Do we need to treat those immune animals? And I think the answer is yes, and that's traditionally what most people have done. And I would continue to do that. So I don't think it really, changes what we're going to do necessarily on the elimination programs versus what we've done today. So I don't think it really changes that. I do think it tells us that there's a continual risk. And so again, making sure that we're good with the biosecurity after we come in from the eliminations is going to be important. We know that Mycoplasma, again, doesn't move real fast through areas, so that's one plus to it. We know that about 6% of the herds will become infected over time when we looked at negative pigs being placed in pig-dense areas. So we know that that could happen. If there is, if you do an elimination, you can see a recirculation. It does appear that that's going to be shorter, but it's probably no more risk than having a negative animal there as well. Yep. Sure. Nope. The question was, when did we take the test? And it's like all other great projects. When you first start to talk about it, it takes a little while to get the funding and get everything together to make it all happen. And so the herd started showing clinical signs, and in early, the irony of it all was that the farm had just gone out and tested pigs in the finisher that had been all the way through the cycle and tested, and they were all negative, and everybody's going thumbs up, eradication was a success, and this was great. No more than got the lab results back maybe a week or two more, and all of a sudden it's clinical signs in the sow farm, and sows are these negative animals are coughing. And so that was probably about 6 to 8 weeks after that we did the initial sampling, and then it was another probably 8 weeks after that we went back to do the second sampling. So if I had it to do all over again, I'd do that sampling very quickly. One of the challenges was when we debated on doing the sampling in the initial was if you sample too early, will you give them time to shed to the immune animals to find it, because Mycoplasma is a very slow shedder. We wanted to give enough time for shedding to occur to find it if it did happen. I think now that we've got a preliminary look at it that says that happens, we could probably go in and look earlier and see if that's occurring at an earlier stage, and then follow some animals a little bit more. Again, there's never a shortage of projects for graduate students to do.